How to support a friend who is healing from narcissistic abuse. First, you want to make sure that they understand what narcissistic abuse is and how it can take many forms, including emotional, psychological, and even physical abuse. You want to make sure that they know that a narcissistic abuse can be difficult to recognize, especially if you are in the middle of it, and that healing from it can be a long and a challenging process. Recognizing the abuse. Explain that one of the first steps in healing from narcissistic abuse is to recognize that it is happening. Mention that this can be difficult because narcissistic abusers often manipulate their victims and make them feel like they are the ones at fault. You want to emphasize the importance of seeking out support from trusted friends, family, or even get professional help if you see the situation warrants that. Explain that healing from narcissistic abuse is not something that you have to do alone. Take care of yourself. Explain that healing from narcissistic abuse requires taking care of yourself physically, emotionally, and mentally. Mention that you can include things like getting enough sleep, getting a healthy diet, exercising, and finding ways to cope with stress. Emphasize the importance of self-care and the healing process and encourage that they find activities that bring them joy and help them relax. Find closure. Explain that finding closure is an important step in the healing process. Mention that this can involve finding ways to let go of the pain and resentment that they may be feeling towards their abuser. Emphasize that finding closure is a personal process and may involve different things for different people, such as seeking therapy and finding different ways to move on from the relationship. Remind them that listening is a process and it is okay to take it one day at a time. This is the end of part one. In part two, we will give you 10 examples of narcissistic abuse and what you can do to avoid it. This is part two of how to support a friend who is healing from narcissistic abuse. In part two, we'll look at 10 examples of narcissistic abuse and what you can do to avoid it. Number one, gaslighting. This is a form of psychological abuse where the narcissist manipulates the victim into doubting their own memories, perceptions, or even sanity. To avoid this, try to keep track of conversations and events and consider seeking support from friends, family, or a therapist. Number two, love bombing. This is when the narcissist showers the victim with excessive affection and attention in the beginning of a relationship, only to later withdraw this attention and become distant or abusive. To avoid this, try to pay attention to how the person treats you over time rather than just at the early stages of the relationship. Number three, triangulation. This is when the narcissist involves a third party in the relationship in order to create competition or jealousy. To avoid this, try to maintain boundaries and communicate directly with the narcissist rather than relying on third parties. Number four, discarding. This is when the narcissist abruptly ends the relationship and cuts off all communication, often after the victim has been emotionally invested in the relationship. To avoid this, try to be self-aware and recognize the warning signs of a narcissist and consider seeking support from friends, family, or a therapist. Number five, blame shifting. This is when the narcissist blames the victim for their own behavior or mistakes, rather than taking responsibilities for their actions. To avoid this, try to stay calm and avoid getting defensive and instead focus on clearly communicating your own perspective and boundaries. Number six, guilt tripping. This is when the narcissist manipulates the victim into feeling guilty for their behavior or for something that is not the victim's responsibility. To avoid this, try to recognize when you are being manipulated and don't take on guilt that doesn't belong to you. Number seven, the silent treatment. This is when the narcissist withdraws all communication and refuses to acknowledge the victim's presence or needs. To avoid this, try to set boundaries and communicate your needs clearly and consider seeking support from friends, family, or a therapist if this behavior persists. Emotional blackmail. This is when the narcissist threatens to harm themselves or others in order to manipulate the victim into doing what they want. To avoid this, try to stay calm and set boundaries, and consider seeking support from a professional if you are concerned about the narcissist's mental health or their own safety. Number 9, projection. This is when the narcissist attributes their own negative thoughts, feelings, or behaviors to the victims. To avoid this, try to focus on your own thoughts and feelings and communicate them clearly rather than getting drawn into the narcissist's projections. Number 10, financial abuse. This is when the narcissist controls or manipulates the victim's access to their financial resources. To avoid this, try to establish financial independence and to be aware of any red flags in the early stages of a relationship. I hope you have gotten value from this. I hope you have gotten some tips on how you can help your friends that you see suffering from the narcissistic abuse. Thank you for listening. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video.